Again, Gills fans, welcome back to the latest episode of Gills and Blood TV. It's Sunday evening, which of course means it is match day review time, and for the second time in two reviews, it is just me flying solo, I'm afraid. Obviously, Reese does not have access to FA Cup games over in Germany, so you're going to have to listen to me. So what I've tried to do is look at the game, briefly as possible, given the result, and then any other questions that have come out in the fallout from our cup exit at the hand of the returning Steve Bruce's Blackpool side. So yeah, we'll rewind all the way to 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon. That's when team news came out. So it looked like a back four for Gills with a few changes. So it looked like, at least on paper, it was Glenn Morris in goal, a back four of Hutton, Aymer, Masterson and Ogie. It was then Little and Ewan Williams as a double pivot in front of that back four, and then a trio of Jack Nolan, Timmy Dieng, Jayden Clark supporting lone striker Jacob Wakelin. Did it turn out quite like that? I'm not so sure, but we'll get to that later in the show. Blackpool and the returning Steve Bruce after compassionate leave was a good old-fashioned 4-4-2. So it was O'Donnell in goal, a back four of Afire, Gabriel, Casey and Coulson. It was then a quartet of Finnegan, Carey, Evans and Embleton, and then a front two of Ballard and Joseph. Now, before we go any further, I thought it was an absolutely brilliant reception for Steve Bruce, obviously coming back as a returning legend, over 200 games for the club at the start of his career at the late 70s into the early 80s, before going on to play for the likes of Norwich and Manchester United in the top division of the English game. The second bit was the sadder aspect, wasn't it, of his return. It was his first game in the dugout for 4 games. After the tragic passing of his 4-month-old grandson, Madison, recently. Now, the funeral was as recently as Tuesday, so fair play to Steve for getting back in the saddle, so to speak. And yeah, he got an absolutely magnificent reception from all corners of the ground, which I will leave in this episode here now.
And Alex Giles. Welcome to Blackpool. The Tangerines in goal. 1 Richard O'Donnell, 4 Jordan Gabriel, 7 Lee Evans, 9 Carl Joseph, 10 Sonny Carey, 14 Elliot Embleton, 15 Hayden Coulson, 19 Don Ballard, 20 Ollie Casey, 24 Adeluga of Fire and 28.
In terms of the game itself and the performance from a Gillingham point of view, I didn't think it was an awful display, not by any stretch of the imagination. You know, it's a cup game, there's going to be rotation, there's going to be resting. We're still dealing with a massive injury list. Blackpool are a division above, albeit they've not won in 3 before yesterday's game, but they are in League One. And if you look at their results under Steve Bruce before he had to take his leave of absence, they were very, very good. And they were very professional on the day and got the job done. So yeah, it's just same old problems, wasn't it, unfortunately, from our point of view. And off the back of 6 winless games in the league, it just felt like another kick in the stomach. We just don't seem to be learning, do we? That's the sad thing about our performances at the moment. It seems to be copy and paste, rinse and repeat and that type of thing. And the first goal is another prime example of that. We do the hard bit, we get back in and defend the ball really well, and then we take too long trying to clear it and ultimately get punished because the clearance ends up at the feet of a Blackpool player who shifts it on, and then it's a good finish from that point. And we'll talk about that as we look at the first half in more detail. I thought in that first 45 we were actually all right. We come out with a good intent. We were shooting towards the Brian Moore stand, which hasn't helped us, has it, in recent weeks? There was all this joking at the start of the season about Max Eamer not being able to win a coin toss, but well, now he keeps winning the coin toss and we can't win a football match, sadly, but that's by the by. But we were competing. We were generally keeping them at arm's length. We were solid defensively. We weren't carrying a huge threat going forward. I thought Jacob Wakelin had to have Timmy Dieng close to him all the time for that to work, and it didn't always seem to be the case. But the game, I felt in general play was fairly even. They probably had more of the ball slightly, but we were compact and resolute, like I've mentioned. And I think early shots from them came from distance. I think Elliot Embleton had one straight down the throat of Glenn Morris. There was another where Jacob Wakelin thought he'd seen the ball out of play and it didn't go out, and then the effort hit the side netting, but I don't think Glenn gets beaten from there. We had a couple of balls into the box, didn't we? There was a shot from Jack Nolan that flashed wide, I'm not sure how wide, from the other end of the pitch. Someone else had a snapshot that Richard O'Donnell nearly spilt into a dangerous area. But again, the goal, it's just so avoidable from our point of view, isn't it? It's really frustrating. Jayden Clark originally does really well to get back in, deep into his own defensive position down by our corner flag, next to the Gordon Road and the Rainham end. But then takes too long, and that was that was a trait of our first half performance at times, wasn't it? Too long on the ball, players taking too many touches. I think Glenn Morris had a clearance charged down. I think Connor Masterson tried to play one up the line, that had been blocked and went out of play. And then Jaden Clark takes too long, as an extra touch. He's then on his weaker foot, tries to clear it, gives it straight to Elliot Embleton, and he's probably the biggest player on the pitch in terms of one that you don't want to give it to in a dangerous position. Elliot Embleton does really well. He gets his head up, doesn't he? And he spots Sonny Carey edge of the box. And from there, it's a brilliant finish. Technically, it's really, really good. Head over the ball, knee bent. Glenn Morris watches it and hopes that it hits the post and comes out, but it doesn't. It hits the inside of the framework and ends up in the back of the net. And with 5 minutes to go until the break, we're behind in a game where we've been competitive. And we've not been great, have we, chasing games this season in any competition. But here is that opening goal. I would say in all its glory, but it's certainly the good part from Blackpool. I didn't quite get the footage of the build-up, which was where we ultimately fell down. Second period, I thought we played the majority of the game in their half or in their third, but certainly in the better areas, more consistently. The intensity was there, the effort was there again, I think, but in terms of quality, it wasn't quite. I lost count of how many times we got into good areas and then potentially picked the wrong option or overhit or underhit a cross or sent a set play too close to the goalkeeper or too far beyond the back post. And like we've said in recent weeks, and we've probably said for 3 or 4 years, sadly, that it's all right having the ball and getting into good areas. But how many times has Richard O'Donnell been forced into any type of save of note? I remember Jack Nolan effort midway through the second period that he essentially fell on, a glorified back pass. But aside from that, he's not had to make a proper stop, has he? And that's the biggest problem we've got at the moment, is when you're not quite right in both boxes, you ultimately lose more football matches than you win. We chucked a load of players on to try and change the, well, not a load, we chucked on 3 out of 9, which maybe there were some question marks over when you've got the likes of Johnny Williams, albeit probably not in the best form. Ollie Hawkins hasn't played loads, but they're people that in a moment could potentially rescue the game for you, and they were left sitting on the bench, but maybe there's some sort of injury issues there, we don't know. But yeah, their clincher is a byproduct of us chasing the game. We took off a centre-half, didn't we? Replaced him with a forward. That was Connor Masterson, replaced by Marcus Wiley. Josh Andrews, who we've been told can only play 5-10 minutes at the moment, was chucked on for injury time. And you can see what he does bring to the team if you can keep him fit, but unfortunately seems to be made of glass. But yeah, their second goal is because we're chasing the game. We're open at the back. I think we had a back three of Ogie, Amer and Hutton at that point, and it's a good finish again by Carey to double his tally on the afternoon. And yeah, Blackpool deservedly through into the second round. But it just sums up again where we are, and that's why I went with the all too predictable thumbnail for the Matchday Live video. But yeah, here is, for any Blackpool fans watching, that second goal that ultimately put Blackpool into the second round. I think if we're looking for a couple of positives from the afternoon, number one is the return of Glenn Morris. He's fit and ready to play again, and he made a couple of good saves. I think there was one of note from Jordan Rhodes immediately after he'd come on, about 20 minutes from time. Glenn got out too quickly and made a good smothering stop, and he clearly hasn't lost any of his abilities, has he, despite now being in his 40s. So it'd be interesting to see how Mark Bonner approaches this goalkeeping situation when we go back to league business next Saturday against Port Vale, because he's now got 3 keepers fit. You can imagine Luca Ashby-Hammond is going to have to play the backup role continually, which is unfortunate for him, but he knew the drill when he came in to replace the injured Jake Turner at the time. So yeah, who is our number one at the moment? Answers on a postcard. But yeah, that was one positive. Glenn Morris, the cat, returning to full fitness and back in between the sticks. And the other for me, I thought, was a man of the match performance from Ewan Williams. I thought he was really, really good on the afternoon. We've spoken about different central midfielders this season: Ethan Coleman, Robbie McKenzie, Armani Little, what they bring, what they don't bring, what their strengths are, what they can improve on. I thought Ewan Williams was just very tidy in everything that he did. He wanted to play on the half turn. He was willing to take the ball in tight spaces, regardless of whether he had a player up his arse or not. He was happy to take it under pressure. He tried to use it intelligently. He knew when to run. He knew when to offload. And he tried to play forwards plenty of times. Yeah, I just thought it was a really, really good performance from the young man who's had to bide his time. I think when we signed him, we didn't really think we was going to sign Bradley Dax. There was Ewan Williams going to be an option as a 10. And he's played twice now in 2 weeks and got 90 minutes against Swindon and Blackpool as a central midfielder, an orthodox central midfielder. And he's been very good, certainly in the game against Blackpool that I've watched. So yeah, that was the second positive for me. Wasn't sure how he got overlooked for man of the match by the sponsors, but of course it's a game of opinions. But for 2 positives from the afternoon, Glenn Morris and Ewan Williams. Now, unfortunately, on to the negatives. Another injury. It looks like another muscular problem, this time to Timmy Dieng. He stopped, didn't he? About 70 minutes in, clutching the back of his leg, and had to be replaced pretty soon afterwards by Joe Gabode. So we don't know whether we got to it early enough, whether it's a tweak or whether it's something more sinister, but it probably means we lose Timmy Dieng for another couple of weeks. And this revolving door of an injury situation shows no sign of abating, unfortunately. It just seems you get 1 or 2 back and 1 or 2 others just fall down and have to go and sit in the treatment room. Why does it keep happening? Answers on a postcard again, because it's been 3 months now and there's no sign of it letting up. Every time we hear that this player and that player's back on the grass, it seems that, like I say, this player or that player ends up pulling up with something. Is it affecting results and performances and certainly selection, potentially? But that's the trials and tribulations of a football manager, isn't it? Nobody likes losing football matches. That's another negative, especially off the back of such a poor run in the league. It was almost seen as a bit of a relief, I think, amongst the fan base yesterday. Almost a free swing. I said almost, not completely, because of the fact that we needed a performance after 6 very poor games in League 2. Did we get it? In parts, probably, but not to the extent that we need if we want to start improving in terms of win ratios and that type of thing. And finally, was the attendance synonymous with the feeling around the football club at the moment, which is a great shame, because it was a really positive start to the season, wasn't it? We were scoring goals, we were hard to beat, we were difficult to breach, and we've been completely the opposite now for about 5 weeks. We concede soft goals, we look blunt in attack. And yeah, maybe that's the reason for the sub 5,000 attendance yesterday. And that wasn't anything to do with the fact that there was no away fans, because Blackpool, to be fair, to travel all the way down first week of November for a fairly unglamorous FA Cup tie, to bring over 200 was a testament to their efforts, and they were richly rewarded. But yeah, it's just, everything just feels a little bit meh at the moment, which is really frustrating and really annoying, because I remember saying a month ago, after we'd beaten Barrow, how good is it to just look forward to Saturday and Tuesday every week? And at the moment, it's gone back the other way, and it's almost a bit of a chore to go and watch. And that is really sad. Now on to some questions that were raised again. And I said at the top of the show about our formation being a 4-2-3-1 at least on paper. Sadly, on grass, I wasn't really sure what it was. Now, I'm sure Mark Bonner, he's massively qualified to do this job. Obviously, that's why he's doing it. But I couldn't work it out. And for me, there's a fine line between fluid and just being confusing. And I thought our system borderlined confusing yesterday. I noticed at one point it looked like a back 4. Ogie was going wide to be left back. But then at other times, he would tuck in and you'd have Jaden Clark almost playing as a fullback. At other times, Romeo Hutton was playing as a fullback, so it looked like a flat back 5. Then it would fluctuate back to a 4. But the issue then was you had Shadogi going back out to the left back position. But because Maxima wants to be the central defender in a trio, he's then the left side of a pairing, which he doesn't look comfortable doing. We spent a lot of time just going backwards and square and making no progress with the football, which is something I criticised last season under a previous manager. So I have to do the same now. There's passing with purpose, and then there's passing for passing's sake. And I thought a lot of it was done for the sake of things yesterday. We then at one point looked like we had a diamond of Ewan Williams, Marnie Little, Romeo Hutton and Jacob Wakelin, with Jack Nolan and Timmy Dieng almost higher than the centre forward, which didn't seem to work. It negated the threat of Jacob Wakelin because Timmy Dieng often was too far away from him if he won a flick on. At other times, Armani Little looked like a wing-back. Jaden Clark looked like a central midfielder. Jack Nolan was far too often too narrow. again, it seems to be the theme of this episode, but answers on a postcard. And then we come to our manager. And there's been talk in recent weeks about player mentality and character, and it's all things that Mark Bonner spoke about, and I've said this plenty of times in recent weeks. You know about these players and the type of characters they are when things are tough. Now, in the early part of the season, we had tough situations, playing with 10 men, saw things out, brilliant. But then we lost the game against Grimsby, albeit it wasn't an awful performance, but that manifested itself into back-to-back losses at Crewe, where we were awful, back to front, all afternoon. Fast forward 4 weeks and we're now looking at 7 games without a win in all competitions. So that character and that mentality is going to be questioned. And there's a lot of these players that were questioned for the same things under Neil Harris, under Stephen Clements. I think 7 of the starting 11 yesterday have played regularly under both of them previous managers. But that's up to Mark Bonner, like it was up to the previous 2, to get the best out of this group. That's what he's employed to do. What is our identity at the moment? What is our style of play? I'm genuinely not sure. At the beginning of the season, we wanted to play with high energy. We pressed really hard. We pinched the ball and we turned over possession and we scored goals from it. I've seen none of that in recent weeks. Certainly not effectively anyway. I saw a post from a Stevenage fan, Rhys Donnelly, who talks very well about the EFL and his own football club, a couple of weeks ago, and said that when Mark Bonner was linked to the Stevenage job a couple of seasons ago, he wasn't very keen on it, and he got sort of, not moaned at, but into discussions with fellow Stevenage fans. And he said that his issue was with Mark Bonner, that he wants all of his players to be good at everything, and then ultimately, because they're League 2 footballers, they become average at everything. Does he have a point? Because at the moment, I don't see any of our players doing anything in any facet of their game as well as we know they can do. I'm not picking holes on people, but we brought in Jack Nolan, who scored 17 goals and contributed 8 assists last season. Looks an absolute shadow of that player. Looks like he's playing with no confidence, no belief in his own ability. Elliot Nevitt, we brought in, we was told he was robust. He could play 30, 40, 50 games a season. He was going to score goals. He's got 1 in the league and 1 in the EFL trophy, and he's pulled up twice with injuries. We've barely seen him. Like, what is it? Are we cursed? I have to ask that question. I think I've repeated myself again, but I said to Boz at Newport, we could sign Erling Haaland and we could sign Harry Kane and play him as a front 2. They'd only score 3 goals each in this team. And for whatever reason, I do not know why. There's just something about us in forward areas at the moment that is just wrong for whatever reason. Game management yesterday, again, this is something that's been questioned of Mark Bonner in recent weeks. Because it's all right, you know, managing a game when you're 1-0 up, or you're 2-0 up, or you're 4-1 up, or you're 3-0 up. That's great. Sun shining, winning football matches, everything's a bit easier. But in the last few weeks, when we've had to knuckle down and we've had to try and get ourselves back into football matches, I think we've come up short. And he has to take some of the blame for that. Yesterday, we ended up with 4 strikers on the pitch. Joe Bode, Marcus Wiley, Jacob Wakelin and Josh Andrews for the final 10 minutes. But what's the system? You've got a makeshift back 3, and I get it to a degree because you're playing in a cup game and you're just chasing a leveller to take it to extra time. But we ended up with what looked like Joe Bode and Jaden Clark as wing-backs, so they're not high enough up the pitch to influence things. You had then just 3 strikers who we said, let's get them in the box, in Wiley, Wakelin and Andrews. But there's no pattern to the play. There's no constructive style of what we're trying to do there to get ourselves back into a football match. And I revert back to what I've said again previously. So sorry for copy and pasting, but it felt a little bit computer game. Like, oh, we'll just chuck all the attacking players on and see what happens and hope for the best. That was the feeling we got. Was our delivery good enough when you've got 3 strikers in the 6-yard box or the 18-yard box? Absolutely not. Again, more questions than answers, I think, came out of our performance, which, like I'd like to reiterate, wasn't awful against a side from the division above, but we keep doing the same things wrong. We keep falling short in the same aspects of the game, and ultimately, that means we keep losing football matches or drawing football matches that we should be winning. Swindon last week. Plenty of food for thought before a visit from top of the league next Saturday afternoon. But as always, I appreciate you watching and listening to this time. If you are a Gillingham fan or a Blackpool fan, thank you very much. Please consider hitting the like button. Please keep pressing subscribe. You know the target by the end of the season. It's ambitious, but why not? We'll be back later in the week with hopefully a Port Vale fan for a match preview ahead of that big game next weekend. And of course, we'll be in the Priestfield for another match day live. But until then, I hope you've had a decent weekend, football aside, and up the Gills.